Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Hakem, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have a lot to cover. We're going to be talking about Trump's picks, his nominations. That seems to be the big talk of the town. We'll also talk a little bit about Harris's campaign, still looking back at that. And we'll also talk about some New York State issues. First off, my mic seems loud. First off, from a viewer over the weekend, Tyson Paul fight. Tyson told definitely not his old self. Tyson appears to have no legs, fighting flat-footed. Still has good upper body movement. That is, well, it's kind of the talk of the town next to politics. Yes. I watched it myself, not necessarily the Mike Tyson of yesteryear. What were your thoughts? I mean, I guess it's kind of what I expected in a way. I mean, he's still 58 years old. You don't expect a 20-year-old Tyson to get in there. But, yes, definitely flat-footed. Came out strong in the first round. But I think I read at the New York Post said that Tyson threw 78 punches and only landed 18 in the whole fight. But as you know, the rules were changed in a way. That's why they most likely weren't in Vegas, but because it did count on the records. But were changed in a way to definitely benefit Paul. But at the same time, Tyson knew what he was getting into. Speaking of sports, Raiders tight end Brock Bowers joined the NFL's latest celebration trend. Have you heard about this? Doing the Trump dance after catching a touchdown pass. While Bowers and thousands in the stands and online seemed entertained by the dance, the Raiders' public relations team was not amused. Bowers gave the silver and black in the third quarter of their game against Miami when he caught a touchdown pass from quarterback Gardner Minshew II. After the game, a game that Raiders ended up losing, Bowers was asked about the dance move. He said, "I've seen everyone doing it. I watched the UFC last night, and John Jones did it. I like watching UFC, so I saw it and thought it was cool." However, following his answer, USA Today reported that the Raiders' PR team cut Bowers' media availability. No longer allowed to talk because it's a pro-Trump dance. You know the dance. I'm not going to do it, but you know that dance that Trump does. Yes, John Jones did it when he won defended the belt for heavyweight in UFC. He did the dance as well, then ended up giving Trump his belt. Now, that was something that UFC was so political with Trump, and Mike Johnson was there, Kid Rock, so many others that Elon Musk that surround themselves Trump surrounds himself with, that it was really interesting to watch because it was so political. The C-SPAN covered it. I watched last night the YouTube rebroadcast, if you will, of C-SPAN, just not watching, you couldn't see the fight, just pointed at Trump and his, if you want to call it, entourage. It was interesting to see Mike Johnson walking out of the tunnel. It looked a little out of place, but yes, John Jones doing the Trump dance, they're calling it, and now the Raiders shutting down PR availability because Brock Bowers had the audacity to do something that could be kind of seen as pro-Trump or supporting Trump in a way, which is that goofy, if you will, dance that everyone is now doing. So there's your sports update. Starting off the program with sports, but kind of politics. I want to also talk here in just a moment about New York, because we're going to hit the ground running. Oh, I want to mention Paige King Johnson. She's an up-and-coming country singer. We recorded an interview quite some time ago, and because of the nature of the political season, we got a little bit busy and did not have an opportunity to play it, so I think it's only right during the Student Senior Services Fund section of our program to play that interview with Paige King Johnson. So that's coming up in just a little bit. We've been talking about, quite frequently, about this idea that you shouldn't even have Thanksgiving dinner with your family if your family is Trump supporters. Whoopi Goldberg said it, Sonny Hoiston, others on The View. There was a psychologist saying that for your mental health, you should pass up Thanksgiving dinner with someone that disagrees with your worldview because they don't care about you. It's such a narcissistic, selfish idea that how dare you vote for Trump when I feel that he's bad for some mythical reason that is not proven to be the case, some reason that he's going to steal people away from people. These you hear such outlandish things, but the fact that you couldn't pay for your groceries or your bills that are overdue, that should not have been in consideration. What should have been in consideration was your narcissistic cousins or whoever opinion about what Trump is or isn't. So now we learn about peaceful silence. And according to the Express, it is sweeping America. Not only was the Republican candidate on course to win the presidency, but he was also set to do so empathetically, defeating rival Kamala Harris in every single one of the battleground states. Well, Ava had to battle with the fact that a man she felt put American values to shame would be leading the country for the second time. The student felt the education system was to blame for Trump's reelection, but the truth was that she had supporters of the former president within her own family. Oh my goodness. Quote, the majority of my family are Democrats, but I have like a couple of family members that live down in Florida and they're Republican. We usually try to avoid conversations like that. But I've been texting my uncle for weeks and weeks and weeks trying to debate with them. I got no luck with that. I know he doesn't want to open that conversation with me because he knows I'm very passionate about keeping our democracy. So how dare he threaten democracy by supporting Trump? Do you see the narcissism here, the ego? I got no luck with that, meaning that she was trying to convince him to vote for Harris. Now, no matter how you look at it, over half the voting population supports Donald Trump. So what are you supposed to do if you want to have conversations with your family that have the audacity to support someone that could maybe benefit them, maybe help them as they struggle to pay their bills, struggle to put food on the table? Quote, I'm not really interested in having that conversation today, she said with a sigh. And I'm not interested in having that debate with them either. Hearing the two sides of American politics describe each other, it can feel as if Democrats and Republicans come from two different planets, says the Express. But traveling around the USA, it quickly becomes clear. Ava is far from alone in having a family split, divided by the country's bitter partisan politics. On the leafy banks of Lake Michigan, Chris Kellums felt strongly about her neighbor's pro-Trump yard signs, Her giant Harris Walls place card overlooked an array of smaller cardboard displays on the lawn next door, which read, "Deport liberals," and "Critical race theory is racism." Quote, I'll be blunt. It shows a lack of education of some of the folks here. They do not understand that what our laws are, and they miss the civics classes that we all should have had on what you're allowed to do as far as citizenship. You're going to deport liberal folks? Really? Where are you going to send us? How much is it going to cost? Where are you going to get the money for that? Who is going to foot that bill? So condescending. And again, it's very much like when Biden called Trump supporters garbage, or you have Michael Moore over the weekend said basically we're an evil country. I'm going to get to that a little bit later on. But the idea of that it shows a lack of education of some of these folks. That this, again, Chris Kellums is so much smarter than you. This goes back to Jimmy Kimmel when he was, I feel sorry for you that voted for Trump because you don't know what you've done yet. We need brilliant people like Chris Kellums from Lake Michigan to lecture us because if nothing else, they did not learn their lesson. This idea of being called garbage, being called deplorables, the list goes on and on. It's a common refrain from Democrats demeaning half the country. You are just not smart enough to realize how brilliant these people are and what you've done to this country. You are a threat to democracy. You should have took civics classes. You should have been more educated because we see what's happening in the education system. Just look at the college campus protests of anti-Semitism, anti-American, anti-police protest. That's the kind of education you needed to learn what you can and cannot do in this country. Now, she, of course, is making a point that the sign that said deport liberals, obviously seen in humor. I think most of us would agree that that was obviously a joke. Now she takes it very seriously. Where are you going to send us? What's the cost going to be? Quote, you need to get a life and you need to become more proactive in what the future is. They're looking backwards. Those people need to get a life. She is doing an interview, again, with The Express, complaining about yard signs. And it's the people with the yard signs that need to get a life. Interesting. But just a few days earlier, she played host to someone who was on the opposite side. Quote, my brother was just up here visiting, and he's a confirmed MAGA Republican. I have a divide in my family. Well, why is that a divide? It's your brother. Does it have to be a divide? Or is it just because your opinion matters so much and your brother just doesn't understand democracy and the threat to democracy that Donald Trump poses? So now there is a divide in your family. On Kellum's property, there was little doubt about who she backed. Almost every vantage point was covered in Democrat flags and banners. But again, remember, her friends with 2 yard signs need to get a life. Her neighbors, not friends any longer. Her neighbors with yard signs need to get a life, as her whole house, any place you look, had Democrat flags and banners. The family's effort to get Harris elected went beyond simple visible displays. Kellum's husband is a local party organizer who goes door to door, knocking to get out the vote. All of which creates an awkward situation when her brother arrives in his SUV for a family visit. Quote, even though he had to park his Lincoln Navigator right in front of all those signs, nobody said a word. He asked, where's your husband? And I said, well, he was out canvassing. But we just don't talk about it. Otherwise, it was going to be a big family fight. On the Madison campus of the University of Wisconsin, friends Dylan and Declan felt very differently about the election's outcome. I'm happy Trump won, Declan said. I'm excited. Our border is going to be under control. The housing crisis is going to be handled. We're going to get our energy back. It's going to be good. His friend Dylan was not as pleased. I have a mom and a sister, and women's rights are being taken away. Their solution, like it was for everyone else the Express spoke to, was peaceful silence. We agree to disagree. It doesn't get in the way of things. I would never dislike somebody just because of their views, said Dylan. I mean, you also think like I'm from a urban city, Chicago, and he's from Pewaukee, Wisconsin. We were raised in 2 very different ways. It remains to be seen how long these vows of silence will last. Yes, I spent an awful long time on that story. But again, you just don't understand. You need to get a life. You don't understand the threat to democracy because you're just not educated enough. How does that make you feel out there? Is it a little bit of that condescension that maybe led to Trump's landslide? I think that's the only way you can define it. Landslide victory on the 5th. Now, we've got to take a short break. When we come back, a quick couple things about New York. We've got some updates on the media. We're going to talk about Harris's campaign, Trump's picks for his cabinet and for people around him. FCC pick recently. We'll talk about that as well. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you for joining us. So many great comments. First off, hope we talk about Biden's plan to send long-range missiles into Russia. Very stupid move. What or why do you think he's doing it? Is it for one last big payment from Ukraine into the Biden bank account? Could be. And did you happen to hear President Trump's plan to stamp out fake news among other current administration lawfare issues? Yes, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But first off, to your point about the long-range missiles into Russia, Donald Trump Jr. said that the United States, the recent aid to Ukraine, is a bid by the Biden administration to, quote, start World War III before his father takes office in January. President Joe Biden authorized the Ukraine military to use American-supplied long-range missiles to strike targets inside of Russia, a stark departure from his previous approaches that were aimed to de-escalate the war. Trump Jr., who's 46, tweeted that the military-industrial complex is trying to undermine his dad before he takes office by pushing the war further into chaos. Quote, the military-industrial complex seems to want to make sure that they get World War III going before my father has a chance to create peace and save lives. Gotta lock in those trillions. Life be damned, imbeciles. Biden's decision permits the Ukraine military to use a U.S.-made Army tactical missile system in the Kursk region, which sits on the northeast border between the two countries. The missiles have about 190-mile range and boast a massive blast radius. Ukraine signaled that it would take advantage of the new stock of weapons within days after months of pleading for permission to use the American missiles amid crushing setbacks on the battlefield. So there's something to be said there. Now, Trump has vowed to end the war. As you know, he said it on the campaign trail. He is the only person who can bring both sides together in order to negotiate peace and work towards ending the war and stopping the killing. Now, according to Victor Davis Hanson, on January 3rd, 2020, the Trump administration conducted a drone strike near Baghdad International Airport, killing Soleimani. You remember that. Soleimani had a long record of waging surrogate wars against Americans, especially during the Iraq conflict and in its aftermath. After the Trump cancellation of the Iran nuclear deal, followed by U.S. sanctions, Soleimani reportedly stepped up violence against regional American bases, most of which Trump himself ironically wished to remove. A few days later, Iran staged a performance art retaliatory strike against Americans in Iraq and Syria, assuming Trump had no desire for a wider Middle East war. So Iran launched 12 missiles that hit 2 U.S. air bases in Iraq. Supposedly, Tehran had warned the Trump administration of the impending attacks that killed no Americans. Later reports, however, suggested that some Americans suffered concussions, while more damage was done to the bases than was initially disclosed. Nonetheless, this Iranian interlude seemed to reflect Trump's agenda of avoiding endless wars in the Middle East while restoring deterrence that prevented, not prompted, full-scale conflicts. Yet in the second Trump administration, retreading the deterrence needle without getting into major wars may become far more challenging. The world of today is more dangerous than when Trump left in 2021 because of the inept Biden administration, which has utterly destroyed U.S. deterrence abroad through both actual and symbolic disasters. The Chinese dressing down of the U.S. diplomats in Anchorage, the humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan, the brazen flight of a Chinese spy balloon across the U.S., the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the October 7, 2023 massacre of 1,200 Israelis, the serial Houthi attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea, the visible restraint of Israel from fully replying to Iran missile attacks on the homeland, and renewed aggressions on the part of both North Korea and China towards American allies such as Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Of course, a second-term Trump must radically reform the Pentagon and beef up the military while warning enemies of the consequences to follow from any unwise aggression. But if opponents believe such admonitions remain only vocal threats, then empty verbiage surely will erode deterrence further, such as President Biden's serial and empty braggadocio don't. So this goes on and on, but I thought it was a very good point. That Trump remains a Jacksonian. But such deterrence entails warning from time to time the reckless and adventurous abroad that our allies have no better friend than America, and our adversaries no worse enemies. In other words, Trump must remind Americans that only by periodically deterring enemies can we prevent endless wars. And now we learn that the lame duck Joe Biden has ramped up sanctions on none other than Israel and easing up on terrorists. As he heads for the exit, President Biden is easing sanctions on Hamas and Hezbollah while sanctioning Jews in Israel. Under pressure from Israel-bashing critics, you would have thought they would learn after the election, but of course they didn't, including scores of congressional Democrats. A president who stood firmly behind Israel after the October 7th massacre seems to have lost his moral compass. And just as President Barack Obama, in his last months in office, allowed the UN Security Council to pass a resolution slamming Israel, Biden may use sanctions to further turn the screws on the Jewish state in the lame duck stretch. Very troubling, very discouraging. You would think they would have learned their lesson about coddling the anti-Semitic section of their party, but apparently they did not. For its part, Congress should investigate the process behind the sanctions. Finally, Trump should warn the lame duck administration that expanding the sanctions program could spur him to keep Biden's executive order in place and use it instead against progressive groups with connections to the Palestinian terrorists who are destabilizing the West Bank. After all, turnabout is a fair play. That's coming from the New York Post. Yes, thank you to the viewer who sent in about the criminal records of felons and others being sealed. This happened just the other day. It went into effect. We talked about it extensively with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. We're going to talk about it when we come back from this break. We've got a lot to cover. I feel like we're moving really fast this morning. We still have a interview that we recorded quite some time ago, but it needed to be played. We just got so busy with political guest Paige King Johnson will be joining us. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Thank you again to Boss Security for sponsoring the Roof Cam. Visit Boss Security in Horseheads for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thank you again to the viewer who sent this. I think it was Friday, might have been Saturday. Criminal records, including felonies, will be automatically sealed thanks to the Clean Slate Act. Hochul and Albany Democrats continue to prioritize criminals over law-abiding New Yorkers. This coming from the New York State Senate Republicans. Governor Hochul has once again sided with criminals by signing the Clean Slate bill into law. This reckless legislation will automatically seal the criminal records of individuals convicted of certain crimes, including felonies, after just a few years. This betrayal of public trust puts communities at risk, making it easier for offenders to reoffend while leaving employers, landlords, and law-abiding citizens in the dark. Now, I know we talked with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano about this not that long ago and really extensively. About it. The idea was, one of the things that they said is, businesses need more employees. There's just not enough employees. So this will open the door. Well, then why not just be straightforward? If these businesses want people that have, for instance, felonies, then just hire them. You don't need to hide that fact, cover up that fact that they had the felony, or again, landlords who don't know who they're renting to. Again, this is four things that we learn about the Clean Slate Act. 1, automatically seals the record of individuals convicted of felonies, including violent crimes such as assault, robbery, and even manslaughter. 2, it will place undue strain of law enforcement resources as they monitor offenders. 3, makes it more difficult for employers to make informed hiring decisions, as they will no longer be able to see an applicant's full criminal history. And 4, it makes it more difficult for landlords to protect their tenants, as they will no longer be able to see a tenant's full criminal history. And this ties in with a very good piece from the New York Post editorial board, saying that there's a dire prognosis for New York's population if trends keep up. A shocking new study warns, if Albany can't rein in its progressive misgovernment, the state will soon find itself a shadow of its former self. Cornell University researchers, and I mentioned this last week, projected a drop of possibly 2 million people or more over the next 25 years, whittling the total from 19.7 million to less than 17 million. The researchers cite the failure of enough newcomers to offset lower birth rates and deaths. Domestic migration flow are the biggest driver of population change in New York. The consequences for the state are grim. A loss of seats in Congress, meaning less influence over federal policy affecting New York. Well, yeah, and if you think about that, Governor Hochul attacking the president-elect is probably not a good move either for New Yorkers, but continuing. Less federal funding based on population, a blow to businesses and jobs, plunging tax revenue for the city and state. And all of this follows steady net out migration that's plagued the state for decades, the mass exodus that we've talked about so often on this program. Back in the 40s, recall, New York's share of the national population translated 45 seats in the House. Today, it's just 26, with a good chance of dropping to 23 after the 2030 census. During COVID, from April of 2020 to July of 2022, New York City alone lost nearly 500,000 people, or 5.3% of its inhabitants, according to State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli. Some returned, but others are gone for good. Meanwhile, Florida and Texas grew during that time, as did the nation as a whole. Why is New York losing ground? Simple. Progressives keep boosting taxes and letting crime and lawlessness run rampant. Public schools have failed to teach kids what they need to know. On Thursday, Governor Hochul announced plans to resurrect congestion pricing, a regressive multi-billion-dollar tax on Midtown Manhattan motorists. That follows a $1.1 billion tax hike a couple of years ago and a $4 billion hit in 2021. Meanwhile, felonies remain up about a third over pre-pandemic levels. Sprawled out druggies plastered on the street. Migrant thugs run free. And though New York spends far more per student than any other state, only about half the kids in 3rd through 8th grades were deemed proficient on standardized tests. The progressive agenda is clearly a repellent. If it's not tamed soon, it could spell the death of New York. And we have a comment from a viewer. We are doomed with Hochul. I think her team is up, or her term is up in 2026. Yes, it is up in 2026. That's why a lot of people were discouraged in a way that Lee Zeldin was picked for Trump's cabinet, for Trump's administration. Many speculating that he would run again for governor. It seems as if that Congressman Mike Lawler may be interested in running. I know that he is more of a moderate Republican, but still something better than Hochul. Yes, I do believe we're doomed with Hochul. It's not going to get any better. I mean, you're attacking the president-elect. How much help do you think we're going to get from Washington when you make it a point to go after the incoming president? All right, thank you for all the comments. Keep them coming in. A quick update. I mentioned how CNN was laying off hundreds of people because their ratings plummeted after election. And we've seen so much bias from CNN in the past, and they'll never learn their lesson. Well, according to Charles Gasparino over the weekend, he said CNN might actually find its way to the auction block. Layoffs, salary cuts, and a new digital programming model that may or may not work. This is all CNN. But On the Money has learned that private equity firms have been crunching the numbers on a possible acquisition of the ratings challenge network. Don't exactly hold your breath for anything happening soon. His sources, both at CNN and in the private equity business, say the network's parent, Warner Brothers Discovery, isn't shopping CNN. Indeed, no firm has made a bid. The PE people I spoke to don't really know how to really value the thing because of its troubled business model. That said, I know at least one major PE firm, and likely more, that have crunched the numbers. Analysts believe CNN makes what looks like a decent amount of money, around $750 million this year. Sounds good until you realize that's down from over $1 billion in 2020. Cord cutting is taking a toll as people stop watching cable news, meaning declining cable fees. CNN is an international news operation, so it has high overhead. When people cut the cord, you can't charge as much for ads. The balance sheet says the ad revenue are down to $1.5 billion for the third quarter compared to $1.7 billion for the quarter of 2023. Another issue, private equity executives also believe the programming still veers too much, you guessed it, to the left, where there's a dwindling consumer market, or Kamala Harris would have been elected president. As one top executive at the top PE firm told Charles Gasparino, yes, lots of sniffing, but people think it's a wasting asset. That's too harsh. Full disclosure, I have friends at the place, and I respect the work of its top people and producers. But it says here, they may not have to look too far for buyers. They may be out as we know it, getting a little too far left, perhaps purchased and reorganized to be more fair and balanced. Now, we've got so many things. I know I'm covering so much this morning. We do have that interview with Paige King Johnson coming up after this break. We're going to talk a little bit about the Harris campaign. It turns out Harris's campaign paid Oprah Winfrey's production company, Harpo, even more than initially reported. We had learned that it was $1 million for the production of that virtual town hall. And many people, even Oprah's hometown newspaper, saying, why didn't you just chalk that off to a loss as a donation to the campaign? Why did you have to get that $1 million from the campaign? Now we learn it's closer to $2.5 million that was paid to Harpo, which is Oprah's production company. We're going to tell you some other information about Harris's campaign. Then we're going to talk about Trump and his administration. But coming up next, we're going to hear from Paige King Johnson. She's an up-and-coming country singer. And full disclosure, I did record this quite some time ago, but we ran out of time playing it because we were so busy during election season, and we've been so busy with the news the last few days. But it's only right when you do an interview to play that interview. So we're going to hear from her coming up after this break, and then I'll be reading comments and covering all the news of the day. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio. And joining me over Zoom, Paige, thanks so much for being on the program.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about the new album, The Barn Sessions Acoustic. Why did you decide to go acoustic?
Well, I'm a sucker. I'm a songwriter at heart, and so I just love to hear songs stripped down. and kind of hear them, how I always say, how they came into the world at the first place.
Sure.
And I love giving listeners an inside scoop into that and just getting to hear the heart and soul behind those songs. And as a songwriter, you have to believe in the songs that they can stand up on their own and not have all this fancy production around them. And so I like being able to give people a listen into that.
Yeah. What was it like recording the album? And does something like that, because it is your songs, does it get emotional almost in a way?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gives you a chance to kind of reconnect with those songs and those lyrics and take you back to that moment whenever you got the idea for the song,
Sure.
or the moment that you stepped into the writing room that day and didn't know that you were going to come out with that
Yeah.
song. It does. It kind of connects you back to them and kind of grounds you back a little bit with them.
Sure.
The stories that you're able to tell. And honestly, I felt like I was, able to get some different performances on those songs that I haven't gotten in a long time, just knowing that I was going to sit back and live with them again.
Oh, sure. Is it difficult to pick which songs you're going to include on the EP?
Oh, yes. Because you write new songs and you have, older songs that you've put out,
Sure.
and they're all your favorite for different reasons. And, you have different connections with them all. But I really felt like these four were the right ones to kind of be able to bring to people in this new way.
And tell us about the new single out now, Grandpa's Little Girl. It sounds like it has a very special place in your heart. Could you tell us about it?
Yeah, it was written about my granddad. I called him Papa, and he's essentially the reason that I'm in music today. He bought me my first guitar when I was 10 years old as a Christmas present, and then after he had passed away, years later, I ended up getting his hand-me-down truck as my first vehicle. And so, there's so many memories of him and I wrapped up in that truck, and that song just kind of takes you through all of those memories and, reminds people, if it's not a truck, it's something else that they have that kind of helps them hold on to people that have passed on.
Of course. And that's why I asked if it was emotional, because that song is so heartfelt that I would find it difficult to, show the world something so personal.
It is, but honestly, music is healing, and
Sure.
I know that if I'm having those feelings and I'm missing somebody and finding comfort in that tangible thing that I can hold on to my granddad through, I know that there's got to be plenty of other people out there that are experiencing the same thing. And just, I think as songwriters, we can help put other people's emotions into words when they can't.
Yeah,
and
of course.
that's what this song is.
So who was it when you were growing up that influenced you? What music did you listen to end up pursuing this career?
All kinds of stuff. A lot of classic country was played in my household.
Okay.
So that was the main thread that was kind of always there, whether it was Loretta Lynn, Patsy Cline, Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings.
Of course.
I mean, we ran the gamut of classic country stuff in our household. So that's where I learned to tell stories and tell the truth, and really just be able to strip stuff down and not try to do too much.
Sure.
I think that's when music can get confusing, or it can get frustrating to songwriters, and it's like, just step back and what do you want to say?
Right.
It doesn't have to be this newfangled, unheard of thing. You're just telling a story.
Yeah.
And so that's what I go back to often.
When did you know that you wanted to do this for a living?
Around the time I was a sophomore in high school was really when I think it started clicking in my brain that, hey, there's people that pay their bills from playing music.
Right.
And that can also be what I do. And that was really when I started kind of taking music seriously as a business, and realizing that could be a career and not just something I did for fun.
Wow. What was it like? You recently performed on the Grand Ole Opry stage. Now, as someone that wants to make this their career, that must be like the moment, right?
Oh yeah, truly something that I'm going to be telling my grandkids about for forever and ever. Like, hey, I was cool one time. But just, all of the greats of all music, not just country music, have stood on that stage in that circle, on that specific hardwood, and so just like trying to take it all in while also trying to give a decent performance and not let everybody know that I'm freaking out on the inside. Was all happening in the 3 minutes that I was up there.
Yeah. Is it something that you can even remember when it's over? Or is it like that brain fog that people get?
No, I definitely, there's little moments that I do remember of like, and as it was happening, I remember telling myself, and mind you, this is all happening while I'm like trying to sing the correct
Right,
lyrics.
right.
But I'm like, okay, like remember this little bit, or remember what you saw over here, or remember how your legs are shaking,
Sure.
or like, remember, like all the things. It's
Yeah.
just like, okay, soak this in and like take little pictures in
Yeah.
your mind to store away.
Well, and it's amazing when you talk to people that are seasoned performers that have played on that stage hundreds and more times, and they'll say the same thing, that it's so special every single time you're at the Grand Ole Opry.
It truly is, and I hope to be somebody that revisits that stage for years and years, and I can only imagine there's just something about that place that's just holds so much history and holds so much, there's just everything that's all in that space, and just a really special.
And just because I'm a media person, I have to ask this question. Tell me about Minutes of Music that you're participating in, the WRAL. Is that something you wanted to go to, that kind of the media side of things?
It was really just kind of landed in my lap. It was such a God thing, and wasn't anything that I had strongly been pursuing, but really has been a cool new venture for me. I didn't really think that adding news anchor to my resume would be something that would happen at least this early in my career, but it has been really cool and kind of opened up a whole new world for me, and I have gained a whole new appreciation for all kinds of news media outlets, because there's a lot that goes into it, and even a year into doing this segment of mine that I get to do every month, I'm still learning something new every day.
Now, because I interview people a lot, do you find it difficult or easy to interview people?
I love it.
Isn't it nice?
I'm a people person, and I think you have to be that way to be in this kind of world. But it's so cool, and I've gotten to interview some of my heroes in music, and it's just like, how is this my life? You know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's what's unique is you are given the opportunity to ask questions that other people may want to ask, but you're the one kind of in the catbird seat that gets to ask that question, right?
Right, and you're like, hold on, let me write this down because my grandma's gonna want to know.
Yeah. I love when people send in suggestions for questions too, because they're so like genius sometimes. Something I'm asking you kind of the basic questions, but every once in a while someone will throw out a question you go, wow, that's really smart. It's fun. Let's say I'm a media person, so this is why I get all excited about that. So here, I've got a question for you. You write songs, right? You record. We've got the album. We're talking about the Barn Sessions Acoustic EP, and then you play a lot of gigs. Do you have a favorite part of your job? What's your favorite out of those three?
That's a really hard decision to make. I think when it comes down to it, the thing that keeps me coming back for more is the people aspect of it, because I do love people, and it's one of the very few jobs out there that you get to connect with different people every single night.
Yeah, of course.
Across, state lines, across country lines, across ethnic lines and religious lines. I mean, music is a universal language, and so the fact that most of my job is to just be able to connect with people and tell stories is really cool. And I love getting to meet new people all the time and traveling and seeing different parts of the world. So definitely recommend. Highly recommend.
Yeah, I'm sure. And you studied basically music as a business, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. What side of the business part of music do you enjoy the most? Because that seems like the tedious part, right?
Yeah, and strangely enough, I tell everybody that I'm an organized creative. So I'm very type A, very OCD, but also have this weird creative side of my brain, which constantly butt heads, but also comes in handy every now and then. And so on the business side of things, I do enjoy the tedious, minute things of booking travel and figuring out routing and for tour dates and all that kind of stuff, and just making sure, okay, all the hotels are booked and everything is mapped out to where we're going to have to stop for gas, or all this stuff. And so I enjoy getting all of those details together.
Isn't that interesting?
And to kind of make it all work and put the puzzle pieces together.
Wow, I would not have guessed that. Okay. That's how, when I mentioned a tedious part of it, you picked the most tedious part of it. Okay. Okay, that's fair. Now, I like to ask this question, and it's kind of a hokey, corny question, but how do you write a song? Only because everybody who writes songs seems to have such a different way of going at it.
Yeah, there's truly no one formula to writing. I think it all starts with having inspiration.
Sure.
And for me, I find the inspiration when I get out and am just able to be with myself and with nature. And so a lot of melody ideas or lyric ideas come to me when I'm out on a walk.
Okay. Okay.
And so I'll just kind of unplug, take my phone with me, put it on Do Not Disturb, and something will usually come to me, and I'll either be like singing into my phone or
Okay.
into my notes app. And that's where a lot of my songs ideas start, and then it's just getting in the room with the right people. And sometimes it's the lyrics first, sometimes it's the music first. It really just depends on the story itself and who I'm writing with that day.
And there's no, like, you can't give a time frame on something like that, right? Like every week I'm going to have one song. There's just, it's whenever you're creative, right?
It's not, I mean, but again, me being the organized creative, you do have to schedule time because it is a business, and
Yeah,
if
of
you
course.
want to be successful as a writer and all the things. And so, you know, I have 2 to 3 scheduled co-writes with different people every week that I know we're going to sit down and we're at least going to try to start something or make something better or whatever it is. And you also have to do that, like schedule time with yourself to sit down and go through ideas and, you know, figure out what was just a good idea at 2 a.m. and really isn't a good idea.
Right.
All those things. But yeah, you can't, I always say once you start trying to force art, it's no longer art anymore, and it's probably not something people can relate to.
Right. Very interesting. Well, we're talking about the Barn Sessions acoustic EP. Just before we go, where's the best place to find out more and also to hear Grandpa's Little Girl?
Well, you can listen to everywhere you listen to music, so Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, all the places. There's quite a few videos on YouTube as well.
Okay.
So look up Paige King Johnson everywhere and you can find it.
Perfect. Well, tthank you so much. I hope you get to play the Grand Ole Opry again soon. And thanks for being on the show. And best of luck with everything, okay?
Thank you.
We'll have to get you to New York. Add that onto the tour, okay?
Yeah.
When you're doing that. All right. Thanks. All right.
Bye.
We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Thank you again to Paige King Johnson for being on our program during the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our show. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Let's go through a couple of comments. Yes, there is a possibility, and I don't see it necessarily happening, but it could happen where President Biden steps down and Harris fulfills the last few months of his presidency, making Donald Trump number 48, which some on the more petty side have suggested that would make him at least throw away his merchandise that says 45 and 47. So there is something there. Thank you for that. Also, to your point about Donald Trump Jr. running for governor, some have speculated that he may be interested in running for governor. But if he is, he'll have to make that decision relatively soon. That is not something you want to do at the last moment. Republicans have had a history of that, declaring who's going to be their governor, the candidate for governor, with just a few short months left to go. But could be something there. Okay, another comment. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. I've noticed that the highly intelligent among us, like Michael Moore and Bill Maher, use the F word in every sentence. I'm not very educated, but I think that it means that they really, really mean it. If I ever used the word, I would have been invited to my mother's hand of higher education. Yes, she let me use other words like fun, fabulous, and frank. So I guess I'm a little educated. Thank you very much. Another comment. Frank, obviously, I have not been a proponent of the Biden administration. I believe they have minimized the standing of the United States in the world. And I would go as far as saying that we have become a laughingstock in the world. This became painfully obvious at the Asia Pacific Conference in Peru. I saw the picture of the attendees to the summit. Xi Jinping was greeted with the red carpet and was front and center in the picture. Biden was not greeted with the red carpet and was in the second row of the picture near the right side. Yes, very far off in the distance. I saw that picture as well. It was very discouraging. The United States has never in the past been a second row country until now. President Trump will never allow the status of our country to fall that low. I guarantee that he will be front and center in all world conferences during his time in office. Thanks, Scott. I agree. I saw that picture. It was very discouraging, really heartbreaking to see America in that picture be assigned to the second row to the far right, really kind of out of the picture almost in a way. Yeah, that will not happen with Trump. You don't see a scenario where Trump takes a picture where he's not going to be front and center. Miranda Devine has an interesting piece at the New York Post. I know we've got to take a short break, but Nancy Pelosi is finished, she says. No one deserves more blame for the Democrats' $1 billion electoral collapse. We're going to talk about that when we come back, but I do have to take a short break. Thank you for all the comments. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. So Miranda Devine says it's high time to shatter the myth of Nancy Pelosi as a master strategist. Nobody deserves more blame than the ridiculously self-titled Speaker Omerta for the Democrats' $1 billion electoral collapse. Under her ruthless leadership, her party lost the White House, the House, the Senate, and the popular vote. Voters rejected the Democrats coast to coast, even in Pelosi's deepest blue home city of San Francisco, which saw a 7-point swing to Donald Trump. She's the only speaker in history to have lost control of the House twice. She's finished. And yet she still has the hide to reward herself with another term, filing the papers last week to run for re-election in 2026 at the tender age of 86. She'll be 88 at the end of Trump's term. When is too much enough? Her style of partisan viciousness and deviousness turns out to have done nothing to her party but postpone the inevitable reckoning between radical left and common sense moderates. Unfortunately for the Democrats, most of the latter have taken a hike under Pelosi's reign. If the GOP is Trump's party, the Democrat Party is Pelosi's. And what a viper's nest of blame shifting and rancor it has become, as they all blame each other for their humiliating defeat at the hands of the man they derided as a Nazi. Most Americans didn't agree, and now the Democrats and the media handmaidens stand exposed as frauds and liars. If Trump is such an existential threat to democracy, as Pelosi insisted to the bitter end, then why did Joe Biden greet him with open arms and a beaming smile the other day? And a lot of people, I think it was Joe Rogan, had a good laugh about that, saying there's no one happier that Trump won, as we've been saying on this program, than Joe Biden. I decided a while ago that Donald Trump will never set foot in the White House again as president of the United States or in any other capacity, Nancy Pelosi said before the election. This is the same person who said her friend Joe Biden was sharp as a tack until he fell apart on live TV. With her party in ruins, the pent-up frustration with Pelosi's iron grip and flawed judgment is starting to find voice. Expect it to get louder as her efforts to offload blame on Biden leaves a sour taste with party loyalists. Since the humiliating defeat, Pelosi has been filmed publicly squabbling with Donna Brazile, has traded barbs with Bernie Sanders, and has been ripped on The View and MSNBC. The Washington Post fact checker even awarded her 4 Pinocchios for lying that illegal migration was worse under Trump than Biden. The View co-host Anna Navarro called Pelosi nasty for telling the New York Times that the Dems would have won if Biden had quit sooner. Quote, she wants to make sure people know it wasn't her, that she has no blame in this. It's really unseemly, end quote. Simone Sanders Townsend, MSNBC host and former Biden aide, blasted Pelosi for helping orchestrate the very public demise of the president. Nancy Pelosi, everybody talks about how the Speaker Omerta, she's so strategic, she can count. She did all of that when she was the Speaker in Congress. But my question is, where's your calculator now? And I reported on that at the time. Anonymous Democrat lawmakers vented to Axios last week saying she needs to take a seat. Making scattershot comments blaming others is just not helpful. It's damaging. Hakeem Jeffries has been tremendously graceful and respectful of her, but I don't think she is being respectful of him. John Fetterman wasn't afraid to go on the record to express his frustration. Quote, she's embraced this, she's the godmother, she's the enforcer image, and now she's blaming Biden. Well, you can't have it both ways. You got what you wanted, and now you're still blaming Biden? I think it's really ironic that you have a woman at the age of 84 and she's still hanging on. Why not give a younger generation an opportunity to occupy that seat? Why not, indeed? The only reason she's hanging around Congress is the same reason she demanded her successor as a speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, bestow her the Omerta title, her ego. She believes she is the only person capable of crippling Trump's second presidency like she did his first. And she is addicted to the adulation of a lapdog press, overly impressed with the fact she's a female. They even praised her classless, divisive stunt of ripping up Trump's State of the Union speech back in 2020. In her 2 decades of amoral, divisive leadership, the Democrats have become the party of censorship, scolds, war, and corporate interest. She devoted the twilight years of her career to her obsession with destroying Trump and his supporters, whom she slyly set up on January 6th by refusing to give Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund the National Guard backup he begged for, and then turned the January 6th committee into a personal star chamber. All her hatred, the impeachments and lawfare and jailing of Trump allies served neither her party nor her country. Trump is back better than ever. Her party is in ruins, and the country has been through hell for 4 years. At the DNC convention that anointed Kamala Harris as their doomed presidential candidate, Dems were seen sporting buttons featuring Pelosi and the word Godmother, with her face on a poster of the iconic mafia movie, The Godfather. If that's an admission that she still runs the party like a mafia don, nothing is. Is it true that she's a formidable leader in the Genghis Khan mold, as one GOP semi-admirer describes her? But what good were her dictatorial skills to the party she led off a cliff? She needs to ride off into the sunset for everyone's sake. I thought that was a great point and a great piece by Miranda Devine, but we got to take a short break. And then hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. Hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking, as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Frank Akam. So many comments from viewers, and as always, thank you for sending in your comments. So with the Biden administration allowing Ukraine to now use long-range missiles be fired into Russia, if there becomes an all-out war before the end of his term, isn't it part of the Constitution that there's no transfer of power during wartime? Is that what they decided now to allow it? I'm not sure. I know that Don Jr. is saying that it looks as if they're trying to start World War III to make it more difficult for Trump to bring peace and prosperity like we saw in his first term. Another comment from a different viewer. What is the methane tax that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act? They decided last week to implement it. What else do the Democrats have lying in wait? That's a great question about what they have lying in wait. We're not sure what the next few months. January 20th is officially the inauguration day. Of course, January 6th is when the election is certified. We will see what happens. That's a great question. I don't have the specifics on the methane tax. I saw that last week, and I don't think we had a chance to talk about it on the program. I'll try to do a little more digging into that. Thank you very much. Next up, did you notice that Trump got within 400,000 votes of 2020 for around 70 million votes? What happened to the 10 million extra votes of Joe Biden's 80 million votes he had in the election? Well, and then continuing, I'm just saying that there needs to be some discussion on that vote count discrepancy. I think if you listen to maybe the media, they're not talking about that much, but the media or the left, they would say that there just wasn't the excitement level, so people didn't come out. That would be the argument that they would use. But I agree with more thorough reviews of elections. I think that's an important step, and I'm sure Trump is looking into that as well. Continuing, another comment from a different viewer. I was wondering what happened to the chaos that was supposed to be orchestrated by Harris supporters. I'm grateful, but feel anxious about the lack of it. Like it still could happen. Yeah, like I've said on this program, I think there is kind of a shock and a stunned worldview there for a while when the election results came in. And I don't think the Harris supporters and those on the left knew how to exactly handle it. Now you've seen the anger building. You've seen that they have not learned their lesson. And we've mentioned that already on this program this morning. And I do believe there'll be some chaos. I like your term, chaos, created before, as we near, I should say, January 6th. And then, of course, January 20th and Inauguration Day. Do you plan, by the way, question, do you plan on going to the inauguration? I know many people have said that that I've talked to, said that they are going to try to get tickets. I'd be curious to know if you are going to go. Another comment from a different viewer. Term limits would solve a lot of problems. If 2 terms are good enough for presidency to limit power, the same should apply to Congress and Senate. Look at worthless Schumer and Pelosi for an example why. Yes, I mean, as we mentioned, Pelosi already announcing that she's going to run for another term in 2026, meaning that she would be, 88 years old at the end of that term. I do believe term limits would be the quickest solution. Now, there is a side that says that term limits have to be a little bit longer than most would want. You know, like to your point, 2 terms, that would only be 4 years in Congress. That would be 12 years in the Senate. 12 may be more in line, because the problem is if it's too short, you will have the bureaucrats that you don't even know who they are, the people working behind the scenes, the various, you would think of them as almost like interns, but they get paid. They would be the ones running the show, because they would be the ones that know how to operate and navigate Washington. So there's an argument. And next time we have former congressman and now current assembly-elect Joe Semplinsky on the program, he has a point on that, and we'll ask him about that. His point is that term limits, I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth. The term limits are fine. It just has to be for a certain amount of time as to not let the nameless, faceless bureaucrats actually run the show. We mentioned earlier, Kamala Harris's campaign paid Oprah Winfrey's production company nearly $2.5 million for the Celeb Pack town hall. So that's more than double what was the initial estimate. It was originally surmised that Winfrey's company, Harpo Productions, had been paid around $1 million for the talk show Legend's September town hall with Harris, but a new report shows that the dollar amount was greatly underestimated. Two people familiar with the matter told the New York Times that Winfrey's company had actually been paid closer to $2.5 million, still a mere fraction of Harris's estimated $1.5 billion campaign. Yes, $1.5 billion, folks. The famous TV star has denied receiving any personal payment from the Democrats team, and a former advisor to the Harris campaign also said they did not pay anyone for their appearances or support. Winfrey said she did not pocket any of the money and used it to pay her team. She also noted that the Harris team was charged for what they required for the town hall. The Harris campaign broke records for the most donations compiled in the shortest amount of time. Now it's also likely one of the most expensive to date, with her campaign blowing through that $1.5 billion in just 15 weeks. It also saddled the Democrat Party with $20 million in debt. The money largely went towards the campaign's aggressive advertising, as it had to squeeze a year of rallying into just 3 months. There was also grassroots campaigns, social media advertising, and reeling in celebrities and influencers like Winfrey. The star-studded support included famous artists like Beyonce and Lady Gaga. Other billed purchases included nearly $9,000 worth of ice cream from high-end shops, $15,000 in food delivery services, and a staggering, ready for this, $2.6 million in private jet travel during her 2-week push in battleground states in October. President-elect Donald Trump trounced Harris in the election, garnering 312 electoral votes. Trump had an estimated budget of $720 million, according to the Wall Street Journal. Whew, big difference. I read the other day. Oh, by the way, how did everybody do hunting? I know we talked about it on Friday's show. Anybody have any luck out there? But I was reading the other day that podcast that Kamala Harris did. Remember, she refused to do Joe Rogan for a couple different reasons. Didn't want to bring up a marijuana question. She wanted to have him come to her instead of going to the studio, even though she was in Texas, et cetera, et cetera. I read that the podcast she went on that called her daddy, about 8 million people viewed that. Now, that's a good number. 8 million, that's quite a few people. The Joe Rogan interview with Donald Trump, 70 million people watched that broadcast. Or I guess you don't call it broadcast. Watch that interview. 70 million. You think of the difference there and the poor campaign decisions of the Harris campaign. But they asked the question now, The Guardian is anyway, dozens of stars backed Harris's campaign and yet she lost. Is the era of celebrity endorsements over? As pundits have picked over the bones of Harris's election flop, many have aligned on the celebrities for special criticism. The mega-wattage glare of stardom shining on the electorate may have reinforced an idea of a Harris campaign out of touch with ordinary American concerns, especially in an economy smarting from the woes of inflation. Or more bluntly, perhaps the era of celebrity endorsement is over. Certainly the Harris campaign deployed its celebrity power with gusto, we know that. George Clooney, who cares? They asked the question. Stevie Nicks and Harris said Harris is our greatest hope to save the world, and that she might play Harris's inauguration. Beyonce, whose Freedom was Harris's unofficial campaign song, Jennifer Lopez, George Clooney, Lizzo, Katy Perry, John Bon Jovi, and Cardi B all appeared for the Democrats. But now Democrats are questioning if their reliance on A-list celebrity endorsements is symptomatic of their loss of working-class voters. And this is a conversation that was had after Hillary lost. And I was surprised that they focused so much on these celebrity endorsements because it was seen as a negative when it came to Hillary. It was seen as out of touch with voters because many people can't even afford groceries, let alone a ticket to go see Lady Gaga or Lizzo or Katy Perry. And they have Bruce Springsteen, who attacks the, quote, 1%ers, who charges about $300 for a general admission ticket. It's hard to hear him lecture you about who you should vote for. Election accounting records show $1 million of Harris's campaign was used to pay, it's actually now $2.5 million, to pay Winfrey's production company. The campaign also paid for a reproduction stage set of Harris's Sit Down with the Call Her Daddy podcast, Alex Cooper. Yes, they actually built her studio in a hotel room. Cost a fortune. Musicians have long complained that the president-elect used their songs at rallies. Neil Young sued to stop the Trump campaign using Rocking in the Free World. Trump said he didn't love it anyway. On election eve, Trump told a crowd in Pittsburgh, "We don't need a star because we have policy." He went on to slam Beyonce for not singing at Harris's rally, saying there was no happiness. It's just like, give me the check. I want to get out of here. But the claims have revived the issue of show business figures, dipping their toes into politics and the potential for blowback that follows. And we had reported at the time, because there's some that said that Taylor Swift's endorsement would be really a game changer. Remember when they said that? Then she endorsed her at a really awkward time. It was right after the debate. Not a great time for that because it kind of got buried in the news cycle. Though, of course, it was known she was going to endorse. But they said that was going to be a game changer. But remember the polls that showed some, especially younger people, take an endorsement like that and vote the opposite. They don't want to be lectured by Beyonce or lectured by Taylor Swift. So do you believe it is the end of the celebrity endorsement era? I don't think Democrats have learned their lesson. I think they'll continue with that. I think celebrities want to be a part of that for some weird reason, want to be a part of politics. And so I don't think that'll be the end of it. Hey, by the way, Ann Selzer, she's going to end her election polling and her career as a poller with the Des Moines Register after her 16-point miss in the final Iowa survey. If you recall, we mentioned at the time, that is an example of polls being misused almost as propaganda to try to convince Trump voters that it's all over. It's all over but the shouting. If Harris is going to win Iowa, which has been pretty consistent Republican for the last, I think they said, over a decade, then why even bother going out to vote? This is going to be a landslide for Harris. Many people using the term landslide when that poll came out. She was off by 16 points, Trump ultimately winning Iowa. There needs to be an investigation into it. And Trump slammed her over the weekend, calling it a totally fake poll. It had Harris. They said that Trump would lose to Harris by as much as 3 points in Iowa, but he ended up winning the state by a whopping 13 points on the way to the presidency. Quote, a totally fake poll that caused great distrust and uncertainty at a very critical time. She knew exactly what she was doing, he wrote on Sunday. Thank you to the great people of Iowa for giving me such a record-breaking vote, despite possible election fraud by Ann Selzer, and now discredited newspaper for which she works. An investigation is fully called for. This is just another example. This is why we don't mention polls all that often on this program, because it is used to, convince you that it's all over. No sense even bothering to go out to vote for Trump. What's the need? If he's going to lose in Iowa, he's going to lose everywhere. So she has now retired from the polling business. We've got so many other issues about Democrats that we're going to talk about. Also, a few things here about Trump's administration. I see a lot of comments coming in. Keep them coming in. And we're going to take a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you again to Boss Security for sponsoring the Roof Cam. Visit Boss Security today for all your business and home security needs. What a beautiful morning. Whoa, beautiful morning here on Market Street in Corning as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Let's go to some viewer comments, shall we? Okay, that's $2.5 million to Oprah. But what about the other $998 million? Okay, $75 million. Still leaves $928 million plus the $20 million in the hole. You're getting too much math here for me. It's an insane amount of money for her to spend and lose. Mob bosses would be furious about those numbers. Yes, there's a lot of people that made a lot of money from the Harris campaign, whether it's various media outlets and her advertising campaign. I mean, think about it. She was even spending in New York. Yes, a big waste of money. Next up, a different comment. Many celebrities have sold out to anti-American rhetoric. Why would anyone listen? They should move. Many of us would help them pack. Yes, they have. It's to continue your job almost. To keep working, you have to pledge allegiance to the Democrat Party. Remember when Taylor Swift had not endorsed yet, and they started to say, I know she endorsed, this was in the media, I know she endorsed Biden back in 2020, but all of that is for nothing if she doesn't endorse Harris now. And it was almost a threat that it would be the end of her career. And what happened? I think it was less than 2 days later, she came out and endorsed Harris. So yes, it will hurt your career if you don't support the left's favorite causes. If you have a soapbox and don't use it for the left causes, they will attack you, and it gets very nasty. Next up, a comment from a viewer. I like this one. My 12-year-old grandson, Andrew, got his first deer on opening day. Congratulations, Andrew. How exciting. Hunting on his family's property in South Thurston. Well, congratulations, Andrew. That's exciting. I saw a few. Did not get a shot, so Andrew did better, much better than me. Congratulations, Andrew. It's always fun to hear stories like that. Senator-elect Ruben Gallego from Arizona was on State of the Union over the weekend, and host Jake Tapper said, let's talk about, obviously, that's where's that place that you did well? It's, Donald Trump didn't win the Latino vote, but he did better than any Republican presidential candidate in history. According to CNN's exit poll, 55% of Latino men voted for him. That's a 19-point swing from 4 years ago. You say that Democrats need to go touch grass and meet real Latinos. What do you mean by that? Gallego said, I think Democrats a lot of times surround ourselves with people that will affirm what we already believe, or people from our same backgrounds, right? And so you have a lot of Ivy League candidates to hire Ivy League Latinos that don't actually come from a working class background. Most Latinos are actually working class, and sometimes we don't want to hear what they're saying. I had the benefit of growing up, in a working class family. My mom was a secretary and my father was a carpenter. I grew up, still even in my whole family, working class. I actually have a big Latino family too. So I actually have a really good, pulse on what's happening here. We don't want to hear the bad news. I think a lot of times, we knew that something was bad with the Latino community when it comes to their opinion of the economy, because I'm very much connected to it. I think a lot of politicians don't want to hear what was actually happening out there. So again, Democrats surrounding ourselves with people that will affirm what we already believe. And we've talked about that so frequently in the past, the yes men. It's very prevalent in the media. Everybody I know voted for Harris. How could she have lost? That kind of idea. So you do have a little bit of soul searching out there. Jen Psaki, of course, it worked for Biden. Yeah, I think it was Biden. I don't think it was Obama, just Biden. MSNBC host Jen Psaki said the Democrat Party is lost in the wilderness after Harris's stunning landslide defeat. She was on Meet the Press on Sunday. She said, look, I think Democrats are in the wilderness. As you just said before, there's no clear leader of the party. Joe Biden is going to be out of office shortly. Kamala Harris just lost the election. There are a lot of governors and other people who might emerge, maybe that we don't know about yet. But there's no clear leader of the party right now. I could see it being Josh Shapiro in a way. I could see his name being floated for being the leader of the party. I still think, even though many have said that with Trump's win, Obama is no longer in charge, that it was Obama's party up until November 5th, I still think Obama is behind the scenes in charge. But she said that to me is an opportunity because people have to decide. Nobody's given it, right? You seize the mantle or you don't. Are you going to be the person who decides who's the right person to stand up against Trump? Or are you going to be the person who brings the country together? Are you going to be the person who talks about the economy and in ways that people understand? There are lots of ways to do it. I don't know who's going to emerge, but that's the moment we're in right now. So Kamala Harris, well, I will say, obviously she had a devastating landslide loss, so not being looked at as a potential runner, I wouldn't think, in 2028. But they are floating her name as a possible candidate for California's governor's race at 2026. The poll from the UC Berkeley Institute of Government Studies shows Vice President Kamala Harris may benefit from some name recognition in a potentially crowded field and has the support of many Democrat voters in the state. Current Governor Gavin Newsom cannot seek re-election because of term limits. Quote, nearly all voters in the state have an opinion of her, and that's really the big advantage that she brings to an early poll. None of the other candidates are as well known to the voting public. Harris has not released any plans to run for governor, although she had previously joked about doing so. The poll did not match up Harris against other potential candidates, but instead pitched her on her own. The poll was conducted before the presidential election, in which the Times did not endorse a candidate. Out of overall California voters, 33% said they were very likely to support her, and 13% said they are somewhat likely. 36% said they are not at all likely to support her, while 6% said they are not too likely, and 12% are still undecided. Well, there you go. We got to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Let's go to some viewer comments. I was also wondering if the presidential candidates have matching money from the government. That would possibly mean taxpayers on the hook for half of it. No, I believe that is just the state level. So if you're running for state office here in New York, you can get matching funds. They did that in a way to supposedly keep corruption down. I don't know if it's done that or not. But yes, you know that candidate at the state level that you hate, you are funding their campaign. All right, another comment from a different viewer. Hey, this is from Ken. Hey, Ken. I punished myself once again and listened to Meet the Press on Sunday. Wow. Hakeem Jeffries was on and was lamenting that there are more qualified people to fill cabinet positions than Trump is suggesting. I guess his idea of qualified people are diversity picks, not people that are actually qualified for the position, like Kamala Harris, Rachel Levine, Pete Buttigieg, Karine Jean-Pierre, and many others. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I saw that he was out complaining that Americans deserve better. Well, it's just like this headline. I got another comment from a different viewer. But before that, as Trump vows mass deportation, polls suggest growing support, but not a mandate. Well, I think he got a mandate when he won the popular vote, when he won the election for the White House and the House and the Senate. Anyway, I just think that's funny. So yes, to Hakeem Jeffries' point, there's better people. It's just like when they say loyalist. He always wants loyalists around him. Every president in the United States history has wanted loyalists around him. You don't want someone that's going against your best interest, or as Donald Trump Jr. said, thinking that they're smarter than the person that the American people voted for. But a comment from a different viewer. Good morning. Hey, good morning. Regarding political endorsements by celebrities, I've always made up my own mind. A celebrity endorsement has never meant anything to me. However, as I've gotten older, those celebrities with whom I disagree with will never make a dime of my money. I will despise them to the grave. Wow. But I understand. It has ruined a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, a lot of music for many of us. And I always thought how, you've heard me say this a million times, that a Democrat could never be a Republican for a day when you look at the questions that they're asked, at interviews like on Meet the Press where they're attacked. I watched Speaker Johnson give his interview just being attacked. They could never handle it. But also, if you only were to listen and watch people with your worldview, if you're a Republican, you would be very limited, because as we go back to these celebrity endorsements, Democrats feel to boost their career, celebrities feel to boost their career, they have to support Democrats and have to use their quote unquote soapbox to support Democrats. But if you're a Republican, what are you listening to? If you only listen to people that support your worldview, because that's what Democrats do. That's why Stephen Colbert is so popular amongst that crowd. The View is popular because they want people. It's why MSNBC's ratings were skyrocketing. People want to tune in that are Democrats and just have their worldview confirmed, so they can clap like seals and laugh along with those jokes about the bad orange man. But if you were a Republican and you're just listening to Republican artists, what do you got? You got Ted Nugent. I'm sure there's more. We now learned that you could watch Sylvester Stallone movies. You can do that. Charlie Daniels. You could listen to. I'm not going to go through the list, but it's a very limited. Kid Rock, clearly. Did anybody watch the UFC fights on Saturday? That was really amazing. And like I said, it was even shown on C-SPAN. Not the fights, but just the shot of Trump and his supporters, or his entourage, if you will. You had Musk there. Speaker Johnson, I like him. I think he's doing a great job. Just looks so out of place. It doesn't look like he's ever been to a fight in his life, but it looked like he was having a blast. Kid Rock was there, so many others. But it was fun to see it, and you knew he was going to come back, and it was going to be a big, grateful welcoming, and it sure was, back at Madison Square Garden. Remember that Madison Square Garden that became so negative and synonymous with Nazis for some reason. Hey, did you see Adam Schiff believes that Trump wants to use the military against him? What an egotistical maniac. Jake Tapper said, President-elect Trump repeatedly called you the enemy from within, you and Speaker Pelosi specifically. And he said this about his enemies from within. And he played a clip of Trump saying it. Tapper said, do you think that he was talking about using the military against you? And how concerned are you about retribution? Schiff said, clearly that's what he was talking about. Would he go to the link with the military and essentially fulfill some kind of unconstitutional order? I would hope the military would have more independence than that. Historically, the military has stood up to civilian authority where civilian authority has suggested, as in his first administration, unconstitutional acts. Look, I'm not going to be intimidated by anything he says, by anything he does. If I was, I wouldn't be on your show. I'm going to do my responsibility in the Senate. Californians are expecting me, first and foremost, to work and get things done. Work across the aisle where the president wants to fight prices. I will work with him. Where the president wants to engage in unconstitutional abuses of power, just as he did in his first administration, I will defend our state. I will defend the rights and freedoms of the American people. So yeah, that's what he said. That's what he may try to do, but I'm not being intimidated. And yes, he did say that Russian collusion, yes, he's brought it back up. It is Adam Schiff. What pencil neck? Is that what Trump called him? Was not an overstatement on my part. First of all, it wasn't an overstatement. There is evidence of collusion. The Trump campaign manager was meeting with Russian intelligence and giving them internal polling data, just to give you one example. The Mueller report sets all that out. Wow, how pathetic, folks. I was really hoping Garvey would be him, but it was an uphill battle. Also, Michael Moore, who I don't recall if we brought up on the program, but I know I meant to. He did an opinion piece right before the election, all but guaranteeing Harris's win, and is saying so very confidently, very cocky, if you will, saying that Harris was going to win. And if you recall back in 2016, I took note of it because back in 2016, he had predicted that Trump would win. So I took note and I read it, and I didn't agree with anything he said, but it was an interesting piece, and he believed Harris was going to win. Now he says, and he tweeted this out or told his fans I think it was on Saturday, we have a nonstop cavalcade, a sordid laundry list of evil deeds that led us directly to last week, to the point where we, the people, by popular vote, elected a 34-time convicted felon, a fascist, and a civilly charged and convicted sexual abuser to be our 47th president of the United States. And we did so after he clearly and quite honestly warned us that he was going to do a mass roundup and deportation of nearly 15 million people, and that he would consider executing people he referred to as the enemy within, i.e. his political opponents and those who were disloyal to him. Well, keep in mind, it was the other side. It was the Biden administration using lawfare against Trump. But you could see that's why they wanted the lawfare, because he could say 34-time convicted felon. Moore then added his recommendations on how to get the majority back, the first of which is to be the anti-Trump by practicing kindness. He then described being kind by claiming that Trump and his supporters practice cruelty, hatred, bigotry, misogyny, ignorance, and fear. So that's how you prove to be kind, by calling, much like Biden calling Trump supporters garbage, Michael Moore calling us that we use cruelty, hatred, bigotry, misogyny, ignorance, and fear. He added that people should listen, with the addition of especially to women. Moore also suggested that his readers that they should join some left-wing organization and hope people would support the creation of a First Peoples Cultural Center in their town. Take care of yourself. We need strength to fight. It's really that simple. And for us to win, really win, this will require 100% of our body, mind, and soul. So drink tea, listen to music, go snowshoeing, eat ice cream, rest on a shoulder. Randomly, just start singing the Beatles' Let It Be right now. Don't wait, just sing. When I find myself in times of trouble, practice gratitude. Get a pedicure. Notice birds. Do standing push-ups, what's that? Against a closet door. Cross the river into Canada with no clue as to why you were there. Pro tip, call home and announce you've left the country. Moore also warned fans to get some real news, after which he offered left-wing sources such as ProPublica, The Guardian, the CBC, John Oliver, Chris Hedges, and other far-left outlets. He closed a list of recommended sources with terrorist-supported Al Jazeera. Make this pledge. I will be the first to stand for, and then it's a blank space. Migrants who've come into this land, the unjustly incarcerated, the Palestinians who are being erased, the books I want my daughter to read, especially at 8 years old, the frightening trans kids who see political ads on TV warning the world that he is the monster. After years of calling every center-right American a racist, a Nazi, a sexist, a hater, and monster, Moore next advised people to forgive someone, then asked people to laugh more. Two ideals he himself seems to rarely practice. In the end, Moore fans would probably do themselves a favor if they listened to Bill Maher instead of Moore. After all, Moore's antics these last 10 years or so is why the Democrats lost. But Maher has something more useful to say. Maher closed his recent show with some very good advice to Democrats, warning them to stop being stupid. We got to take a short break. Stay with us. Keep those comments coming in. We'll be right back. with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. So many comments this morning. We're having a blast. Let's go to them. How many counts would Biden have if he were fit to be tried in criminal court? Great point. Which questions? Why is he still in office? But then again, Harris would be a disaster even for a mere 2 months. I agree. That's why so many people are nervous that could potentially be the case, that she would be 47th president, making Trump 48th. That has been coming up by numerous people, not just here on this program. Next up, good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. How do we survive Hochul for 2 more years? Great question. And hopefully, as Republicans, because they normally wait so long, hopefully we get out ahead of this and really have a good candidate. I know many people have said, what about Don Jr.? I would love to see Don Jr. run for maybe mayor, run for governor. It would be fantastic. He's got the name recognition, but I wish I had the answer. I don't have the answer for how we survive Hochul for 2 more years. Next up, hey, Frank, could you ask Ken? Okay, Ken, I know you're watching. This is a question for Ken. Hey, Frank, could you ask Ken what his secret is? Maybe what he eats for his strong ability to stomach those shows? Yes, Ken is a glutton for punishment and what he watches. But Ken did write in here, not related to that question yet. I'm sure we will hear from Ken on how he can stomach the shows that he watches. But he said, again, on the legacy media Sunday propaganda shows, they were talking about Pete Hegseth being put up for Secretary of Defense. In the conversation, they were slamming him for saying that he doesn't think women should be in combat and touting that the armed services today are the most diversified fighting forces in the world. I don't think a diversified military is something that strikes fear in our enemies. A military that is full of testosterone-filled men willing to fight with everything to protect the greatest country in the world and the people that they love is a thing that has always made other fighting forces quake in their boots. Pete is right, and hopefully he straightens out the generals that blindly agree with the Democrats' woke ideology. Yes, that woke ideology, and many people said, well, those college kids, wait till they get to the real world. And then, as I said at the time, this was a long time ago, when they get to the real world will change for them. And it started in the military. It started in government agencies where they pushed this woke agenda. And unfortunately, it's why there is such an issue with recruitment. And Pete Hegseth has that whole book on it. And that's why many people believe that he was chosen, because of that important book. Next up, a different comment. I've never liked Moore, meaning Michael Moore. Always thought he was an idiot, but now, in addition, believe he is also a dizzy idiot who is full of himself and hot air. He's definitely full of himself and hot air. I don't like Michael Moore either. I will say, and this may make me unpopular, I did like his movie Canadian Bacon. He actually directed Canadian Bacon with John Candy. So that is the one good thing in his career. But that's only because of the brilliant John Candy. But yes, Michael Moore is very full of himself. He always has been. That piece that he wrote right before election guaranteeing Harris would win was just a piece patting himself on the back. So the typical Michael Moore. Now here is a question, not a question. I'm going to pose it as a question. But the headline from the New York Post says, by Michael Goodwin, says Matt Gaetz and RFK Jr. are 2 cold turkeys who cannot be in Donald Trump's cabinet. All victorious politicians get a honeymoon with the public and the press that can linger for months, perhaps even for 100 days into the term, except Donald Trump. Yeah, he didn't get one in 2016. He won't get one here in 2024. He lasted about a week, and if you blinked, you missed the shortest love fest in political history. He wouldn't have it any other way. Fresh off the landslide win, the president-elect had the spotlight to himself. Democrats were mostly stunned into silence, and his chummy fireside chat with Joe Biden put an exclamation point on his return from the political boneyard. A smiling Biden greeting, welcome back to the White House, kneecapped the deniers and the resistance. Take that, Kamala. All the feel-good vibes must have been driving Trump mad. He needed to break up the party by creating some trouble, and so he did. His nominations of Florida Representative Matt Gaetz for Attorney General and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as head of Health and Human Services slammed the brakes on the honeymoon. Perhaps Thanksgiving came early to Mar-a-Lago, and a restless Trump felt the need to act presidential and pick out 2 turkeys to pardon. Then again, calling Gaetz and Kennedy turkeys is an insult to the real thing. What are your thoughts? I know a lot of people are saying they don't think there's any way that they'll actually get the job, that they won't survive the nominating process, the whole confirmation process, but interesting. Matt Gaetz and RFK Jr. are two cold turkeys who cannot be in Donald Trump's cabinet. Your thoughts? RFK Jr. was at the John Jones fight as well. Trump picked Brendan Carr to lead the FCC, calls him a warrior for free speech. His current term runs through 2029, and because of his great work, I will now be designating him as permanent chairman. Commissioner Carr is a warrior for free speech and has fought against a regulatory lawfare that stifled Americans' freedoms and held back our economy. He will end the regulatory onslaught that has been crippling America's job creators and innovators and ensure that the FCC delivers for rural Americans. Carr can get started as FCC chairman right away, foregoing the typical Senate approval process for cabinet picks once Trump enters office, since he's on the commission already and was unanimously confirmed to a new 5-year term last year. Thank you, President Trump, Carr wrote in a statement. I'm humbled and honored to serve as chairman of the FCC. Now we get to work. We must dismantle the censorship cartel and restore free speech rights for everyday Americans, he tweeted. That's great news coming from the Trump transition team. Brendan Carr to lead the FCC. All right, let's take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. And we are back. That's the Frankly Speaking roof cam right there. Look at beautiful historic Market Street. Thank you to Boss Security in Horsted's. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Couple comments from viewers. I don't think Michael Moore is an authority on anything except being a college dropout. That's true. I guess to be an expert in the eyes of the Democrats, all you need to do is spout hate for Trump or hate at the Republicans in general. I mean, that is Michael Moore's career. That's why I jokingly referred to Canadian bacon. That's about the only thing that I know that he did that wasn't, and that even was a little political, I suppose. I haven't seen it in years, but very political, like Fahrenheit 9/11, Bowling for Columbine, etc. So yeah, I don't know what makes him an authority other than he very often attacks the right people. He attacks the Republicans, and that makes you an expert, I suppose. Next up, regarding Hochul, what happened? Why can't the legislature pull her out for some cases against her, like not being fit to be governor of New York State? What about that hassle with the Chinese woman? Yeah, I mean, a Chinese spy in her administration. Boy, that really died off, didn't it? Not a lot of coverage of that, is there? Well, she really wants to be a bigger player than she is. She clearly doesn't have it. I mean, think of the moronic decision to attack the president-elect the day after the election, after that landslide victory, ensuring that New Yorkers will suffer now and not get, and I think Trump's better than that. I think he will still help New York, but, really putting us, the voters, in danger. This viewer asks, who is the lieutenant governor? Yeah, well, sometimes just be careful what you wish for. It is Antonio Delgado, by the way. And I don't think that would, well, I don't know. I think he would be just as left as Hochul. But I agree with you. Why has there not been more done about the Chinese spy in her administration? What about, in the meantime, get Trump Jr. in there in line to be voted on or to run against the lieutenant governor? What would that do? Are there other points where he has, sorry, this gets broken up a little bit in the calls. But yes, I do enjoy your comments. Thank you very much. And I do laugh very often at what you have to say, so I appreciate it. In a good way. I didn't want that to sound nasty. So Trump's incoming border czar, this guy's becoming real popular. Tom Homan. He says that the Biden administration has blood on their hands for Laken Riley's murder. Look, if President Trump was president, he would be in Mexico in the Remain in Mexico program, meaning the alleged murderer of Laken Riley. How did he get into the United States? And he got arrested in New York for a crime before he committed this murder. He would have never been released on the streets. He would have been turned over to us. So this administration has blood on their hands. Good for him. No wonder he's becoming so popular. He does not beat around the bush. Look, if they're not going to help us, we'll just double the manpower in those cities. They don't want ICE agents in their neighborhoods, but they don't let ICE agents in the jail. They don't understand if you let us in the jail, that'll be less agents in your neighborhood. And then he talked about that gang, that Tren de Aruga. They're on notice. Their days of violence and bloodshed in this country are coming to an end very fast. My message to them, my gang is bigger than your gang, and we're going to take you out. Good for him. Vivek Ramaswamy teases that the mass reductions under the new Doge group, I don't know what you want to call it, and expects certain agencies will be deleted outright. Talk about a disruptor. This is exactly the kind of thing you want to hear from those in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency. It's Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, as you know. I did hear that joke. I think it was on Greg Gutfeld's show, that leave it to government to have a group on government efficiency, and you need 2 people instead of 1 person to lead it. But I thought that was kind of funny. We expect certain agencies to be deleted outright, Ramaswamy said. We expect mass reductions in force in areas of the federal government that are bloated. We expect massive cuts among federal contractors and others who are overbilling the federal government. I think people will be surprised by, how quickly we are able to move. Now, critics such as Richie Torres argue that eliminating entire agencies will require Congress. Government 101, no federal agency will be deleted without an act of Congress. The president cannot undo by executive order what Congress has done by statute. Congress, not the president, is the final word on the fate of federal agencies. Still, they can't stand the fact that it's disruptive out there, that's what Trump was hired for, was voted for. Pentagon is bracing for sweeping change after Pete Hegseth was announced for secretary. The Pentagon is bracing for sweeping policy changes under the incoming Trump administration, and some high-level officers could find their careers on the chopping block. President-elect Donald Trump has nominated Pete Hegseth, a former Fox News host and veteran of the Iraq and Afghanistan war, to lead the Defense Department. An iconoclast whose pick roiled the defense industrial base. Yes, that's what they said. It's like a bomb went off in insider Washington. Exactly. Again, why Trump was voted for. If you have to have a sex change or a social justice seminar, then you could do it somewhere else. But you're not going to do it in the Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, Space Force, or the United States Marine. Sorry, Trump said at an August 21st rally. The military brass that led these absurd and insulting initiatives will likewise be removed, and they will no longer be in command. They're going to be gone fast. Longtime generals and high-level officials at the Pentagon could find their jobs under threat, even those who don't typically qualify as political appointees. Well, first of all, you got to fire, you got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Hegseth said. Any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever, that was involved in any of the DEI woke, we'll say baloney, has got to go. And what he has said in his book, The War on Warriors. A couple other quick things before we go, so stay with us. We're going to get to as much as we possibly can. Buckle up. We got a lot left to get to. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. A couple comments from viewers. I think RFK Jr. and Matt Gaetz need to be part of the government healing process. Tough problems need tougher men to do the work. Thank you very much. And then Ken has responded to the viewer that asked how he can watch the shows that he watches. If you recall, Ken was kind enough to watch the entire DNC for us. He did the dirty work we didn't want to do. So he says, this is Ken's answer. To answer your viewers' question on how I can stomach watching the legacy media shows. 1, I don't eat anything 2 hours before the shows for obvious reasons. Good call. 2, I sat in my favorite chair to be as comfortable as possible. 3, I have an oxygen tank handy in case I start hyperventilating. 4, my wife keeps giving me moral support, saying don't quit now, you can do it, while she is ready to restrain me if necessary. 5, after the shows are over, I wind down by switching the channel back to Fox News or play reruns of Frankly Speaking. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for answering that viewer's question. We appreciate it. Another comment from a different viewer. Just a thought regarding the downsizing of the government. My opinion is that either the federal IRS department or each state's Department of Taxation should be eliminated. What do you think? I think having both the state and federal tax department is redundant. Well, they're taking different monies. I mean, I guess that's, the state tax and the federal tax, they're going different places, I guess, if I understand right. But hey, any of those, any way you want to get rid of taxes, I'm all for it. So if you think that's the best way, I agree. Did you see RFK Jr. pose with a Big Mac and a Coke on Trump Force One? Now that, of course, is a favorite of President-elect Donald Trump. But it goes at odds with RFK Jr.'s crusade, if you will, on health. Just kind of fun. That was on their trip to the John Jones fight on Saturday. Trump doubles down on provocative cabinet picks as their fates hang in the balance. Donald Trump is refusing to back down over his cabinet picks in the first clash in an epic battle he will wage against Washington when he takes office next year. The coming days will show whether Matt Gaetz, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have staying power for confirmation fights in the new Republican Senate over their assignments to safeguard the rule of law. Why? I understand why Matt Gaetz is quote-unquote controversial. And somewhat maybe what RFK Jr., I guess. I mean, I never thought the media would hate a Kennedy so much. But why is Tulsi Gabbard controversial? Or why is Pete Hegseth? Pete, I mean, they say he doesn't have the background. Well, he most certainly does. Yeah, no, he's not Washington deep state. That's not a bad thing. I don't understand why they're controversial. But to, I think it was Ken's point. Yes, it was Ken's point. Who said that Hakeem Jeffries was on Meet the Press. He said about Matt Gaetz that information should be released on him. And that's not just Democrats saying that. You have repeatedly seen Senate Republicans make clear who are on the Senate Judiciary Committee or throughout that chamber say that they want access to all available information so they can make a decision about whether the nominee for Attorney General is qualified to serve in that office. The Senate has a clear responsibility to serve as a Senate and co-equal branch of government and a check and balance. That's America's baseball, motherhood, and apple pie. Here's what I've said about several of the nominations that have been made by the incoming president, including the one that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was referring to. The incoming president, throughout his campaign, promised the American people that he would have the best economy, the best border security, and the best administration possible. The question that has to be asked is this the best that we can do? In the context of some of these nominations, is this the very best that America has to offer for a moment like this, with so many challenges that we confront? Of course not. America deserves better. Hopefully we'll see the Senate Republicans do their job, scrutinize those picks. All right, that's enough for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Mike Johnson said Trump's cabinet picks are disruptors by design. And John Fetterman from Pennsylvania saying Trump is trolling Democrats with his cabinet picks. Yeah. We're out of time. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow morning starting at 6 a.m. with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox. I look forward to it already.